Hi, I'm TJ Walker, and I'm on vacation right now, but I wanted to not leave you high and dry. So, my team and I have put together sort of some best of elements. You'll see some of the top performing, and most interesting, most viewed videos throughout my career. We're going to go back into the vault and show you some classics. So, I hope you enjoy, and I hope to be back with you live soon. A crisis has hit your organization. How exactly do you respond? How do you communicate to the world, your stakeholders, your customers? Hi, I'm TJ Walker. This video is going to walk you through all the fundamentals you need to know about crisis communications. Exactly what it is, how to respond, how to go about the process of communicating effectively to the world during a time of crisis for your organization. So for starters, let's define what is a crisis. A crisis is something that's happened that is considered of such importance that it could ruin your reputation, your organization's reputation. It's something that could cause damage to you, not just for one day or a minor little blip, but something that could stain your reputation so that you might lose customers, investors might shy away, the public might turn against you, regulators might turn against you. It's that sort of thing you need to be prepared for. It can happen to any organization, a big oil company or a one-person consultancy. So everyone needs to be prepared for a crisis at some point, and specifically how to communicate it to the world. By the way, if you want even more information on how to communicate effectively to the news media during a crisis, at absolutely no charge to you, you can get a free online media training course by clicking on the link below or by going to mediatrainingworldwide.com and signing up for the free media training course, which will help you prepare for media interviews, press conferences during a time of crisis. So back to what is an actual crisis and why it's so important. Well, for example, BP, the huge international oil concern, did not respond very well to its crisis when it had the leak in the Gulf. And because of poor communication, because of consistent bad press conferences by their CEO, their market capitalization lost $30 billion. So when people tell you, why does it really matter? No one pays attention. Wrong. $30 billion. Volkswagen had a major crisis in its reputation when it was revealed that it was cheating on emission standards. Its market capitalization went down $30 billion. 30% of its overall market cap vaporized in just a short period of time. So, folks, that is why it is important to have a plan for when crisis happens. Nobody's perfect. No organization is perfect. No one can control all events at all times. But you can control how you respond to a crisis, and that is what's essential about crisis communications. For starters, there's the timing. Now, many decades ago, when Tylenol had its scandal, it got all sorts of praise for how it reacted to the contamination of its Tylenol products. But people don't realize today, it took them 24 hours to ever respond to the news media. But it was a slower time. News cycles were much slower back then. Right now, it's instant. If there's a crisis that affects your organization, people are talking about it in Twitter, on Facebook, every other social media platform. So you've got to respond instantly. And if not instantly, certainly within the hour. So much of crisis communication has to do with not coming up with the perfect answer that everyone has studied and thought about and reflected upon for 3 weeks. But what is the best answer you can come up with right now for reporters and the public wanting to know what is happening right now? You have to have a nimbleness to you if you're going to be effective. Otherwise, all of your detractors are going to define you. Your enemies are going to detract you, are going to attack you and detract from your overall reputation and image. Other people will define you. If there's a crisis that affects your organization, there's going to be a vacuum, and everyone is going to weigh in. You had better be the leading voice talking about what you and your organization are doing. So for starters, when a crisis happens, it's critical that you very quickly establish what are the facts as you know them. Then, what is it that you are actively doing to make the situation better? And of course, if anyone has been killed, injured, harmed, it's important to express sympathy for those people, not necessarily blame or culpability, but sympathy for those people and some condolences if appropriate, and what you're doing for them. So too often, when there's a crisis, people hunker down. They get a bunker mentality, and their attorneys tell them, don't say anything, don't say anything, and you hide from the media. Absolute worst possible response. When you hide, you are looking guilty. People will assume you're guilty. Guilty people hide. Innocent people are transparent and they answer questions. So when a crisis hits your organization, for starters, you've got to figure out what are the 3 things that you want the public to know. What happened? What are you doing to make the situation better? Are you investigating? Have you shut down a plant? Have you evacuated the area? You can always talk in a positive, proactive way about what you are doing. Now, there are many times when you simply don't know. And the only thing you can do is let people know you have alerted the local fire department, state regulators, federal officials who regulate what it is you do. But it's important that people see you, that they see you're accountable, that you're answering questions, that you're not hiding. Quite often, that is more important than getting a perfect message. Now, you don't want bad messages, but you do want people to know that you're there, you're front, you're center, you're accountable, and you will answer all questions. So when you're coming up with your messages, you really need to have something short, simple, focused, that is the best you can do right now. If there's an explosion at your factory at 9 a.m. and it's now 9:45 a.m., you don't have to know every fact. You don't have to speculate on the cause. You don't have to talk about how this will affect your stock price. In fact, that would be the worst thing to do then. Instead, stick to exactly what has happened, what you are doing. At 45 minutes into the crisis, the main focus may be evacuating the town, how people can get out of town quickly, and all the authorities you have notified and other safety precautions. If it's 2 weeks later, you're going to have a completely different message. What's consistent, though, is that you, someone from your organization, if you're a big publicly traded company, it had better be your CEO, is on the ground, being accessible, answering reporters' questions, and letting the public know exactly what's going on. It's the secrecy that gets us into trouble, because people not only can assume the worst, they will assume the worst. So it's critical that you very quickly come up with a message. By all means, listen to your lawyers, but don't let lawyers completely decide your communication strategy. Let's put it this way. Anyone who lets their lawyers define their public relations strategy, in my view, is as smart as someone who is in front of a judge and jury on murder charges and decides to let their PR person lead their legal case and represent them in a court of law. Obviously, you would consider that person a fool. Similarly, anyone who lets their lawyers define their messaging, in my view, is equally a fool. Lawyers have been trained to understand the law and to keep you out of prison. By all means, listen to your lawyers during a time of crisis. You don't want to say something that is going to set you up for a lawsuit or penalties that will put you in prison or bankrupt your company. But remember this, lawyers are trained to mitigate risk, to use a favorite legal term, mitigate. They want to lessen your risk, your legal risk. So if you just say no comment, In a lawyer's worldview, quite often, hey, that's minimizing risk. I didn't say anything that will come back to haunt me in a court of law. But there's another court you have to worry about. The court of public opinion. So corporations that exclusively follow the dictates of their lawyers quite often may find themselves in a situation where they've got no legal problems, but the public, their customers, their clients, have such a low opinion of them that nobody wants to do business with them. Their revenues fall to zero and they've gone bankrupt. The lawyer can say, hey, did my job, kept you out of prison. Well, what good does that do if you're out of business? So as the main spokesperson for a company, a CEO, if you're a large public company, your job is to certainly take into consideration the legal concerns. But you have to look at the big picture, and the big picture is all of your stakeholders. It's not just the legal system. It is the public, regulators, customers, clients, investors, your own employees. You have to take into consideration the immediate concerns of all of those people, and you have to address them. You have to make them feel better about the situation. You have to make them feel that, okay, it's not a great situation, but these people are trying to do the best they can. They're trying to be transparent. They're not hiding anything, and they're trying to make things better. That's really what's important for all of your communications at varying stages of a crisis, whether it's 10 minutes into a crisis or a day in or 2 months in. You have to convey to the public and the media that you're not hiding anything, that you're trying to give people information as quickly as possible, as accurately as possible, that you're trying to make the situation better, that you're not doing anything for short-term gain, and that you want to make amends. This doesn't mean you have to admit to liability and set yourself up for multi-billion-dollar lawsuits that put you out of business. But that is what you need to convey at every interview and every press conference. You're accessible. You're not hiding anything. Here's everything we know right now that we can tell you. Here's what we're doing to make things better. Here's what we're going to do. Here, other people we're reaching out to help this situation. Those are the themes you need to address in your message, and you need to figure out how to get that out in the first minute, ideally in the first 30 seconds. Now, how often should you communicate during a crisis? The more you communicate, the better. The days are gone when a Tylenol situation can hit and you have 24 hours to respond. These days, if a major company did that, they would be out of business. It would be over for them. So you certainly need to have some statement out within the hour, ideally less than that. If it's a huge, huge crisis and TV crews are there and there's anything visible, sort of a fire, an explosion, a destruction, injuries, you should be available and accessible, ideally at least once an hour, and even more so. Here's the challenge for people, is it's human nature to want to give something new. Well, you might not know anything new for the next 6 hours or 8 hours. And the key is don't guess. Where people get themselves into trouble during a crisis is they want to be helpful, they want to be positive, they want to be optimistic. So, Mr. Walker, will the fire be out in 3 hours? I think so, I hope so. Yes, the fire will be out in 3 hours. Well, what happens if it's 3.5 hours from now and that fire is still blazing? Well, this TV reporter can do a split screen. Here's Walker saying 3.5 hours ago, the fire will definitely be out in 3 hours. And here's the other side of the screen with this roaring fire, raging fire. So now, what does everyone know with 100% certainty? This Walker guy is a big liar. That's what people know. He's not to be trusted. his assurances are absolutely worthless. So be very, very careful with that. Do not guess about the future. Don't be optimistic. Focus on what you know. This is what gets people into trouble. You saw this in the BP Gulf scandal where predictions were made about how little would come out and when the hole would be plugged. Don't guess. Because if you guess and you guess right, you don't get a lot of credit. If you guess and you guess wrong, you get a tremendous amount of blame, misery, and all sorts of negative things happen. So don't guess. Stick to the facts. And if someone says, did terrorism call this? Was terrorism behind this? Don't say, well, it's possible. We haven't ruled anything out yet. That's the worst possible thing. Because now the headline on all the newscasts, possible terrorism at the Walker Industry plant. That's not a good thing. Why cause more panic? Don't buy into the hypothetical of reporters. If you don't know something, simply say, we don't know the cause. Right now, 100% of our efforts are focused on putting out the fire. Now, did I dodge the question about possible terrorism links? No. I didn't dodge the question. I didn't simply use the reporter's words back in my answer. I didn't say, I don't know if terrorism was involved. Anything is possible. What I do know is no. Instead, I answered truthfully. I said, I don't know the cause. Right now, we're focused 100% on putting out the fire. That impulse of wanting to be really helpful and thorough and answer the nuance of every reporter's question can get you into trouble in a crisis situation, whether it's an interview, live TV, or a press conference. So it's not that you're going to cover up or hide or obfuscate or all these things people think corporate communicators do. That's not it. The issue is just to more quickly focus on what you do know. If you don't know something, don't be afraid to say, I don't know. That one answer can solve so many headaches and problems for people during a crisis. Now, as soon as a crisis happens, it's critically important that you have your team together. Now, you could be virtually, it could be on the phone, it could be through Skype video, different locations around the world, but you quickly have to brainstorm on what are the facts as you know them, what are all the messages you could say, and then boil it down to your top 3 messages. And you need a spokesperson. In most organizations, the highest ranking person during a time of crisis is going to be your ideal spokesperson. So if it is a small fire in a regional plant somewhere and it's not a huge international incident, well, then it's a crisis just for that town, for that company. It may be the plant manager. But if it's a huge crisis, something that's getting international attention, and you are an international corporation, publicly traded, it had better be your CEO. Because it really looks like you're hiding. It really looks like you have a lot to hide. And you're being cowardly if you just sort of push out some PR person or some hired gun spokesperson. Not to put down hired spokespersons. I've been a hired spokesperson. So not to put those people down, but you need someone who can speak on behalf of the entire organization during a time of crisis, especially if people are being harmed, especially if other law enforcement officials or other regulators or FEMA people are being brought in. You need to have your top person brought in to the show. Now, how else can you prepare? What I recommend, a few people like to do this, but what I recommend is that you still rehearse before your first interview or before a press conference. Now, you can say, well, TJ, that's crazy. It's a crisis going on. Calls are coming in. There's sirens. There's no time to rehearse. There's always time to pull a cell phone out of your pocket deliver your 3 messages, record it for 30 seconds, look at it once before going into your interview. That is a total of 60 seconds. 30 seconds to record it, 30 seconds to watch it. And you'll feel much more confident delivering your messages for the press conference, for the interviews. Now, if you want more tips on how to come across your best during, frankly, a nerve-wracking time, I urge you, go to MediaTrainingWorldwide.com and sign up for the free online media training course, which is designed to help you during a time of crisis. You can see the link below in the description here, wherever you're watching this. And you can also go to MediaTrainingWorldwide.com and sign up for the free online course on media training. Now, the next thing you need to do if you're an organization is you need to practice exactly how you're going to respond to a crisis when there is no crisis going on. That is always going to be the best time. So plan in advance. You can't plan every crisis, but you can plan on being able to react quickly when a crisis does happen. So I would recommend you do simulated exercises. Think of your worst nightmare. Type it up on a sheet of paper, get your managers together in a room and say, here's the situation. 10:02 today, there was an explosion. Whatever the worst case scenario is for your organization, and every industry is different, give them a really specific scenario, and then let them know there is a reporter, could be from CNN, BBC, NBC, or it could be a trade publication that's highly influential in your world, and let that person know. This reporter is going to be here to interview you in half an hour. Now, come up with message points, come up with sound bites. You've got a half an hour, and then get them back, and then interview them. But here's the thing, you've got to interview them recording it on video. Whether you use a big camera, a camcorder, your iPad, or a cell phone, doesn't matter. Capture your people on camera, record it, ask them tough questions, play it back, and stop every 10 seconds or so and ask yourself, how would it be if this were the only 10 seconds that gets on the evening news? Very different standard than did the person answer the question thoroughly, logically, in great detail. Because you can answer a question thoroughly, logically, brilliantly, in great detail, and be awful, be absolutely awful in the final interview in terms of what gets quoted. For example, Tony Hayward saying, "I want my life back." That was the quote that was seen around the world during the BP scandal years ago. If you looked at the answer to the entire question, he said all the right things. He said, of course we want to help the Gulf community. Of course we want to rebuild the community. Of course we want to give economic assistance to anyone we've harmed. Everything he said was great, positive, on message. And at the very last second, he said, hey, nobody wants to get through this faster than I do. I want my life back too. But then he went back to positive messages. If you saw the whole thing, you would think, wow, what a great, positive, helpful, thoughtful, caring human being this CEO is. That's not what people saw. That's not the standard in a crisis. The standard is, how can any 10 seconds or even 5 seconds of what you say be edited, sliced, diced, put in headlines and in TV broadcast to make you look like an idiot? Because it can happen. Similarly, with Tony Hayward's response to litigation, one of the reporter's questions to him was, are you going to make people whole with these lawsuits against you? Tony Hayward's message, of course we're going to make people whole. We understand we've caused economic harm. We want to give assistance to people. We want to settle. Everything he said was totally positive, non-defensive. Nobody would argue with it. But then the reporter said, well, what about the frivolous lawsuits? And Tony Hayward says, well, hey, it's America. Of course there'll be frivolous lawsuits. But I just want to reassure people, we are going to, boom, and Next couple of minutes, everything positive on message about how BP is going to help people. What was the only quote in the story? It's America. Of course there will be frivolous lawsuits. Negative made it seem like he was saying, well, it's not our problem. It's just these ridiculous, litigious Americans. And it really rubbed people the wrong way. Horrific quote. That's why this is different. That's why it's important to rehearse. That's why it's a different skill set. That's why you can be the world's greatest public speaker and frankly be awful during a time of crisis and being a crisis communicator. Because not only can you be quoted out of context, you have to be quoted out of context. And reporters interviewing you for 10, 20, maybe 30 minutes, they have to pull just 8 seconds out. So when you complain about being quoted out of context, nobody really cares. You're not going to convince anyone because the second you agree to doing an interview, you set yourself up for being quoted out of context. Remember, it is not the reporter's job to make you look good. It's not the reporter's job to make your corporation or your government entity look good. It's your job to do that. Folks, that's why this is hard. It's frankly why a lot of people hire someone like me in my firm to conduct a full day of crisis communications training. So if you're interested in really taking this to the next level, give us a call. You can reach me. I'm TJ Walker at 212-764-4955, or go to the website, mediatrainingworldwide.com. And remember, at no charge whatsoever, you can get a crisis communications media training course. Absolutely no charge. Just go to mediatrainingworldwide.com. I'm TJ Walker. Thanks for joining us in this special edition of Speaking. And may all of your speaking opportunities in life be a huge success, especially the crises.